Hey everyone, TheHearthGuy here once more, and this last year of mine has been somewhat hectic. I've been trying to ramp up production on my videos, expanding the types of videos I do, and figuring out how to do audio without sounding like I'm trapped under the ocean. And overall, improving my YouTubing skills. In the process, my channel has done well, exploding over the course of a couple months far beyond what I expected relatively early into my YouTube career. Real life has been just as hectic, but that's personal stuff that I'm not going to get into. However, what I was doing in real life required me to be a bit more sparing with my money, meaning that I slowed down on purchasing things like, say, video games. This meant I was replaying a lot of games I had previously enjoyed, but also that I was feeling a little bit down that I wasn't boosting my Zoomer brain with new video games. Don't get me wrong, I love Xenoblade Chronicles and I will forever adore all 3 games. Never played X. But every time I see a side quest, I have to ask myself if I really want to do these long, tedious things again. That's when I realized something strange. I had always used a year-long subscription to Xbox Live Gold, a quick $60 fee once a year, and I didn't have to worry about it for the rest of the time. However, Gold had recently changed into something else. Something that would come to be useful for the next year of my life. Starting in September of 2023, Xbox Live Gold became Game Pass Core, featuring a selection of games entirely for free alongside the regular services I had been paying for with Xbox Gold. And I realized that I had a solution to my prior issue. Most of these games were ones I had either never heard of or ever felt the need to play, so I just ignored them. But now, I had an idea. To play every single game on here in alphabetical order and experience the widest array of games that I could. I've played plenty of games, but I'll be the first to admit that many of them are along the same lines as each other. So as a personal challenge to myself, I wanted to expand my horizons and delve into games or genres that I'd otherwise never would. Just to note, I will be skipping games that are sequels to other games, so no Dishonored 2 or Doom Eternal, mostly because I have this very personal inability to play games in the wrong order, and it nags at me every time I learn about a new franchise. I know you can play Doom in any order and probably still comprehend it about as much as anyone else, but again, that's just a me thing. Second, most of this script, save for a few parts like the one I'm saying right now, were written over a year ago or across several months, as I wrote each game segment after I beat said game, or finished my general playthrough of it. I started on the project with the said belief that I'd finish all games available within a year. I did not, for various reasons I will get into later. Still, I wanted to share my journey across the games I did manage to finish, because it was still an interesting experience regardless. Of course, there will be some spoilers where it may matter, so be warned about that. But without any more preamble, welcome to my year with Game Pass Core. Now, the first game is... No. Listen, I've played this game, and while I can see the appeal, without a group of friends you know to screw around with, it's just not that fun. Now, after outing myself for being friendless, moving on to the real first entry. First is Astroneer. Yeah, I'm gonna be honest, I didn't spend a lot of time with this one. I suppose now is a good time to explain my rocky relationship with sandbox survival games like this and Minecraft. Whenever I play these sorts of games, I always have an issue with motivation. I'll start off strong with collecting resources and building a house, but after that I just sort of stop. I have a house, decent protection, and no clear reason to go very far, so I suddenly lack the drive or desire to continue playing. I recognize that this is entirely a me thing. Some people love playing these sorts of games, and I will support you in that 100%. But for whatever reason, Astroneer, Minecraft, and the like just never managed to grip me the same way they so clearly have for many, many people. On that note, Astroneer has a lovely aesthetic with a pleasantly slow pace that's great for relaxation and low stress. I can't say that about Celeste. When I first booted up Celeste, I never would have believed the kind of grip it would have on my life. This cutesy indie game about hopping and dashing up a mountain quickly became one of the most challenging gaming experiences in my life. I have played through all 3 Dark Souls, Elden Ring, Hollow Knight, and did every side quest in Xenoblade 1, but nothing challenged my patience more than Celeste. With platforming challenges and obstacles perfected in such a way that nothing less than complete mastery of the game's mechanics would see you reach the end, it's a game that threatens to enrage to the point of quitting. But persevere and you'll find a genuine story about depression, connection, and grief. Our main character, Madeline, begins the journey up the mountain just like us, with no idea what we're about to put ourselves through and slightly irritated by this crotchety old lady telling us that we should give up now. Along the way, we meet a small but colorful cast of characters, including a seemingly darker part of Madeline who threatens her, attacks her, and berates lonely spirits into becoming vampires or whatever this is supposed to be. So, not great things. Naturally, a central theme of the game is overcoming one's inner demons and coming to terms with the parts of yourself you don't like. Madeline's and our journey along the mountain and through her emotional state is a difficult one. A very, very difficult one. Spikes, orbs, wind, the physical embodiment of anxiety, the ballad ones, and terrible customer service. All of this and more blocks progression in painful succession that will ultimately lead to an intense feeling of satisfaction and accomplishment as soon as said obstacles are overcome. First chapter is, in hindsight, such a beginner's course that it feels almost unfair to play after later chapters, but even then you can die from overconfidence. Patience is one important lesson that Celeste beats into you repeatedly. You also get the chance to meet Theo over the course of the first 3 chapters, and he's a welcome sight in the normally barren and lonely mountain climb. But every chapter's unique challenges are just samples for the summit. Chapter 7 is a marathon where you have to deal with every major mechanic from the previous levels and then some as you bop to the top. And coming to that view, finally getting to the end and being rewarded with the reminder that, yes, I died a lot, was so satisfying. Coupled with Madeline's journey of self-discovery and appreciation, though I'll admit it could sometimes be forgotten in the frustration of the climb. You move 1 pixel out of place and you are looking at a starting screen all over again. But these strict requirements is what ultimately pushed me to improve, and bit by bit move forward through each successive level. My own character arc through Celeste was twofold. First, I thought that this was a relaxing platforming game that I could chill to. And second, I thought that I wasn't the type of person to go above and beyond when it wasn't necessary. Both of those would change relatively quickly for that first one. By chapter 3, I realized that if I didn't put my whole brain and fingers into this game, then I wasn't getting anywhere. Admittedly, there are points where the design of the game feels almost purposely like the creators are trying to screw with you, but more often than not, I can attribute my death to poor timing and not learning my lesson. Problems which would persist all the way to the very final chapter and the very final screen. Speaking of, there are 2 kinds of ends to Celeste. The rational kind where you complete chapter 7, the summit, and say to yourself, wow, I did it. I beat Celeste proper and can move on with my life. And the kind where you look at chapter 8 and 9 and say, bet. Guess which one I took. As Madeline was learning to accept the parts of herself she wasn't proud of and move past them, I was learning to accept the part of myself that demanded complete and absolute victory over this game which had broken my spirit time and time again. Chapter 8 is a roller coaster due to the requirements alone. It doesn't get any easier from there. I had a lot of trouble figuring out the right direction and timing on the heated launch stones or whatever they're supposed to be, and the varying levels of lava and ice gave me a level of stress I didn't think this game was capable of. And with Chapter 8 over, clearly I could beat Chapter 9 no problem. Chapter 9 is titled Farewell, which sees Madeline search deep within herself as she grapples with the loss of a loved one, and deludes herself into chasing after a faint hope of seeing them again. If the summit was a marathon, this is Sisyphus pushing that stupid boulder up the cliff. 9 sub-chapters, each more difficult than anything previously thrown at you. Lightning, jellyfish, pain, birds, crystals, pain, lack of double jumps, pain, and more pain. Then, when you think you're there, it slaps it out of your hands and tells you to keep going before throwing yet another wall in your way. What followed was a long process of completing every alternate version of every chapter, at least the B-sides anyway. I'm not so far gone that I'd do the C-sides. After acquiring every heart at the end of all the primary 7 chapters B-sides, the second half of Farewell is an experience. Thousands of times I died. I spent hours, days, slowly grinding my way towards the finish line, and even then, when the final stretch was there, it held me for 3 more days. With all that in mind, I think you'll understand the elation I felt when I had last reached the end. 22 hours of hard work in just Farewell alone, not counting the extra work on the B-sides. 44 hours of gameplay in total, and one last jump that I almost forgot to make, and I'm free. Celeste was an ordeal, one I won't soon forget. It challenged me in ways that I hadn't been in years, not since I first played Hollow Knight, and even then, that was clown college compared to this. I respect the genuine emotions behind the work and the story within, and remain impressed by the design of most obstacles, even if some of them felt like the creators were just trying to screw with me. Interestingly, it wasn't the last game that would test my patience. I've dabbled in the roguelike genre with games like Hades, traveling through the same grand labyrinth over and over again with minimal personal progression, at least at first. However, nothing Hades had could prepare me quite for what Dead Cells was going to throw my way. With one of the slickest combat and progression systems I've seen, stellar game design, moody atmosphere with challenging but fun bosses, Dead Cells reintroduced me to a genre I thought I understood. Let me set the scene. On a desolate island kingdom lost to time, a strange sludge drips down from above and attaches itself to a headless corpse. Lighting it to life with fire and lightning, walking forward you see a somewhat friendly face who talks as though she knows you. Brushing it aside, you head forward into the dungeons filled with rabid beasts, soldiers whose purpose is long forgotten, and horribly deformed monstrosities. However, you manage to brave past them to a small safe haven where a peculiar creature works. Again, it seems like he has some knowledge on you, but simply asks that you bring him some cells, the essence of the creatures you killed, and in return, he'll give you some gifts. This is Dead Cells, this is The Collector, and we are just getting started. Hades encouraged me to keep playing through the characters and the interactions surrounding it, not so much the gameplay. But Dead Cells is the total opposite. There's virtually no characters in the real sense. They're all just props for the game's mechanics. Meanwhile, the gameplay is so addictively simple that I've found myself losing hours to attempted runs without realizing it. Each area is unique in both the challenge and the atmosphere it presents. You always start in the prison dungeon, but from there you can find yourself in any number of other environments that threaten to end your run early. From the depths in the catacombs or the highest point in the castle, your one and only prerogative is to survive and make a build that facilitates that. And doing so in a timely manner, because if you don't, you'll miss out on extra cells, gold, and items that could make the next room much easier on you. But I know some of you may not be a fan. I get it. Certain difficulties just aren't for everyone. But Dead Cells has another bonus to it, a difficulty slider of sorts. It's more complex than that, having an assist mode you can toggle if at any point you're more interested in immersing yourself in the gameplay than experiencing a challenge. Now, normally, I'm not a huge fan of the idea of a safety button in a game like this, or in a game like Hollow Knight, and some more hardcore fans might roll your eyes at it. Again, I get it. But there again belies the beauty of Dead Cells. Dead Cells serves as an homage to not just its genre, but several indie action games of its like, while also functioning as a much welcome intro to the genre as a whole. And that assist mode goes back to it. There are games out there designed specifically for challenge and incredible overcoming of said challenge. Believe me, I know. But Dead Cells is designed to welcome people into a style of game that I genuinely believe more people would get into, and for those who aren't interested in Hades, who want a more technically refined gameplay experience. As such, this is a solid alternative. It was with all this that I slowly was able to learn and adapt to the little intricacies of the game world, and its rules. I began to form better builds and get further and further, admittedly at first with minor help to myself by letting me die a few more times, though I began to not even need it. except for the Hand of the King boss fight, which would beat me so hard that I would die more times than the assist mode would allow. There were moments where I had to accept that the build I had just wouldn't cut it out, and I had to let myself die to make a better one. But I persevered, I pushed forward, and I learned. I ascended to the height of the castle, I slew the king's guardian, and when I stood before the throne of the weak king, I stabbed him with the weapon of his right hand. And then I was obliterated, and the credits started to roll. The real game had begun. The first time I saw this, I was taken aback. The phrase, "welcome to the real game," or "the tutorial is over," was always a funny line to drop whenever a harsh difficulty check or cool moment overshadows everything early on in the game. That's not what this is. This is a very real, very legitimate instance where the statement, "welcome to the real game," feels appropriate. Dead Cells doesn't really have a story, so I won't bore you too much with all that happens afterwards, particularly because after my first 2 clears of the game, which I admit, while difficult, were done with assist mode, I had to move on to other games on the list for the sake of the video. But trust me, there is plenty of value here for anyone interested in seeing just what the roguelike genre is capable of. As for me, I found myself indulging in more cyclical pursuits. Descenders has an interesting concept. A procedurally generated bike racing game with highly competitive mechanics, fluid but challenging controls, and as far as I can see, a well-developed reputation and fanbase. It has a quick tutorial to help you learn the basic mechanics, but after that you're free to do or not to do whatever you want. So if you really want to, you can just ride around in the small hub world getting a hang of the controls. I was disappointed to learn that there was no split-screen multiplayer, though it was kind of unsurprising. It's the sort of game that I'd love to sit down with someone to just screw around with. I'm also not a hugely competitive person, so that aspect of the game was just not going to click with me. It is most definitely a game with appeal, but my time with Descenders was rather short in total. Something I most definitely can't say for this next one.
Here lived a boy and his family, a boy dreaming of greatness, of one day being a hero.
Fable is a weird game. It feels almost like something you'd find in a ruin, some ancient artifact of a bygone era that you can only guess what the plan was when it was put together. At the same time, you can see the blueprint of later games as they would eventually be made. Before now, the only knowledge of Fable I had was from a Seth Zintak video, which prepared me for something colorful. And I was mostly not disappointed. The age of the game is evident, but that works in its favor, oddly enough. As the name suggests, it plays out more like a classic fairy tale or fable where everyone either just has a title or some sort of poetic, symbolic name. Also like a fable, it has a very straightforward story about a young boy growing up into the role of a warrior to find and save his remaining family, after some random masked dude comes out of nowhere and becomes a scaly. If this seems abrupt, yeah, it kind of is. There isn't a whole lot of side content as far as I can tell, at least nothing of substance. You can get married to random, nameless, faceless NPCs that do nothing, but hey, you get a neat cutscene. You can become mayor of a city, which never seems to come up again. When the game asks you if you want to be good or evil, it's not a question of the complex sense of morality that every person grapples with. In fact, it is the question of whether you fart at a child or eat an entire newborn chicken whole. Some of you who were around when Fable first came out probably already knew that Fable suffered from this problem. But as the hip, young zoomy that I am, this was a strange experience. Another strange experience was this game's leveling system. With every skill point spent, your character ages, and before the halfway point, I was older than I had any right to be. By the time I tracked down my older sister, I looked more like her grandfather. In theory, this is a cool mechanic, but clearly in practice it is wildly distracting. Unless you want to pay money for some of that age to go away, I have no idea if it Unless you want to pay for some of that age to go away, I have no idea if it worked because I looked the same regardless. One last note before moving on, the magic system is totally busted. Combine multi-strike with slow time and you essentially become that one guy from Fate's Day Night who created reality-bending sword fighting to kill a freaking bird. Congrats, you weeb. Time to move on to some more familiar territory, but potentially equally as questionable game design.
War. War never changes.
See, unlike previous games on this video, I've played Fallout 4 before. All the way through, in fact, and with mods. But it had been a while, so in the name of remaining largely fair and keeping on track with the idea behind this project, I started up the game again. This time with mostly cosmetic and quality of life mods to keep things a little more appealing. I thought about making my character a horrible mismatched abomination, but I settled on a ginger instead and started up the game again. My thoughts of Fallout 4 are this: a good shooter with great systems and a modding community with a lot of passion. I usually find myself exploring every nook and cranny of the Commonwealth while avoiding the main story like the plague. After installing a mod that only gave me 1 Minuteman quest at a time, I found myself really enjoying them way more and even enjoyed settlement building. Add a few other mods to add some spice with new locations and minor NPCs, and the ability to keep my dog with me at all times, and I started remembering what made me love the game so long ago. It's far from perfect. As I referenced before, the main plot almost makes me wish for a nuclear winter. Most of the factions either scream of incompetence or outright villainy, and not even funny over-the-top villainy. Companions can also get sort of one note, save for certain exceptions that aren't just faction representatives. Kate and Nick are chill, I can hang with Piper, and me and Codsworth will conquer the Commonwealth ourselves. However, plenty of side quests are still memorable, and the combat is smoother than it has ever been. I had an okay time digging beneath the Commonwealth to break into someone's tool shed, and running around pretending to be a cheesy comic book character with a Tommy gun will never not be a hysterical concept. If you can find them, significant layers are hidden within many of the characters you run into, or the places you go, with the classic tragedy and comedy of Fallout remaining there even now. New Vegas is the quintessential Fallout experience, but I can't say I mind what Bethesda did with it this time. At least, not all the time. On the other hand...
This sprawling underground shelter may have been engineered by Vault Tech, but it was built by you, the good people of America.
I won't spend long on Fallout 76 since I didn't spend a long time playing it. Due to how multiplayer focused it is, I didn't really feel the need to go too heavily into it, as I'd clearly be missing part of the point of the game. So I'll just give you my first impressions. After 5 years, Fallout 76 is far from the buggy nightmarescape that it once was. But is it a game worth your time? Well, the game moves and looks good, and the story seems generally inobtrusive. Though I spent more time wandering about than really worrying about it, and if that's how you'd like it, then that's good. But on the other hand, as I mentioned before, without people to play with, this game feels a bit emptier than your average Fallout game. And the entire time, all I could think was that I'd rather be playing Fallout 4. Also, early game combat is sort of funny with how everything dies almost instantly. I was running around with a plank as a weapon, instantly killing enemies just because it was much more fun that way. And maybe that's the best way to promote it. It's a game that, when you play it your way, I can see it being fun. It just wasn't my cup of tea. At least not now. Firewatch was interesting. It's a game steeped in its own nostalgic atmosphere that I'm not sure I got the experience the game wanted me to. A quick non-spoiler rundown. The game stars Henry, a middle-aged man who has decided to spend the summer as a fire lookout as an escape from his problems, during which he gets acquainted with Delilah, the snarky lookout across the valley from him. Despite never actually meeting in person, Henry and Delilah's relationship is central to the story and themes of Firewatch, and when it was over, I questioned whether I got the experience I was meant to. One large aspect is the potential romance between the two, which I never really dug into. I liked Delilah and found her charming, but besides the fact that Henry is a married man with some extenuating circumstances that I won't spoil, I think I consistently made decisions that went counter to the game's core message it was trying to portray. I often approach things like the final decision during the last day with a level of pragmatism. I will give the game and its creators credit. It allows the freedom for you to act in that way, and it can't have been easy to design all the different ways conversations could turn out based on that. You can approach Delilah in a platonic fashion, even if it feels like the game pushes you towards romance. There is a grander point to this, of course, but it's one that I don't want to spoil. Beyond that, the atmosphere of the game is excellent, immersing you in this pocket of the world away from everything, where you can connect with the primary protagonists even as things become darker and harder to define within the woods that you watch over. That ultimately ends in a questionable payoff. For those of you who know, you know. Almost everything I could say about this game is one giant spoiler that I may feel the need to talk about another day. But for now, let me leave you with this. If there's any game from this video that I would recommend that you play, it's Firewatch. Forza Horizon 4 was an exception to my previous no sequels to games I haven't played rule. Firstly, because it seems like the game itself isn't really story-based, and even if it was, it's very loose. So I don't have to worry about not understanding stuff that I would with Dishonored 2 or similar games. And secondly, my sister wanted me to get it. Forza Horizon 4 is the first racing game that I've played in years, except the masterpiece that is Final Fantasy VII Chocobo Racing. Compared to that, Forza has a steeper learning curve for a total novice. Early on, I was driving like the road was made of ice, going more through stone walls than where I wanted, and lots of crashing. It was frustrating, but one strength of Forza Horizon 4 is your ability to fine-tune your experience, both in difficulty and with your car. After trial and error, I began to figure out how to actually get where I wanted to go. Understanding what car to use and what customizations to apply to it really expands the accessibility to the various types of events you can participate in. And let me tell you, some of them get creative. I'd go deeper into it, and maybe I will another day, but suffice to say, there's much more to do than I initially thought from what I expected to be a glorified driving simulator. If you've never played a racing game and you have Game Pass, give it a shot. You might just find something to love. Gang Beasts is a by now well-known party game where you can gather some friends around to just have some fun. It's not overly complicated, what you see is what you get, although I do wish the explanations of the controls was better. But once you're past that, you get to thoroughly enjoy a casual, goofy fun time tossing your Fall Guys looking puppet people at each other. Whether online with a bunch of strangers or with a friend or two, it's a solid game to pass the time with. Golf with your friends is a game that assumes you A, have friends, and B, can play golf. Luckily, you can play this game without either of those being true, as I am living proof of. I've never been able to play golf properly before, usually missing or hitting more dirt than the ball itself, but with the certainty of video games, of ones and zeros rather than my mortal hands, I was able to actually hit the ball and learn that this game is okay. Solidly okay. I mean, it's a golfing/basketball/hockey game. It's not trying to be Mass Effect, nor is it trying to reinvent Pong. It sets out to do something and it does that well, and nowadays that's more than a lot of games can say. It shows nice homages to other creators with specially themed maps, it uses unique mechanics that you obviously couldn't replicate in real golf, and it allows for customization with its own honest and humble charm. Honestly, not much more you can ask of a game like that. Obviously, it's not a game I dedicated a lot of time to individually, like some other story-driven games or achievement-based games, but you don't always need that. Sometimes you just need a chill game to return to when you want to relax and play some golf. After that stint of games that I could enjoy but not really invest time into like I could with Celeste, Dead Cells, or Fallout 4, I finally got to a game that caught my attention again, and made me reconsider something I said earlier in this video. Mind you, many of these segments are written as I am or just after I played one of these games. So earlier when I commented that sandbox survival games didn't appeal to me, how it didn't give me a sense of motivation that made me want to keep playing, well, I guess all these games needed were bugs the entire time. Grounded follows one or all of the 4 playable characters as they try to survive having been shrunken to minuscule size. Stuck in a familiar but freshly dangerous world, Grounded takes the idea of Honey, I Shrunk the Kids and made a survival game out of it. What started as me anticipating yet another example of Minecraft or Astroneer boring me to death, and then just jotting down a few notes, turned into a great experience that finally made me get these sorts of games. Let me run you through it. You're dropped into a random hole in the ground with nothing. You can pick up some rocks, grab and eat some shrooms, and drink some water that makes you hungrier and probably poison you. Immediately, you start walking through the grooves in the dirt that create the appearance of a trail and find a tiny white building that will become the center of your world from here on out. Here, you can process the materials you collect and gain both recipes and brain power, which also unlocks recipes once you collect enough. Following the trail and some peculiar shapes in the distance while avoiding the ants, trust me, just leave them be for now, you'll find this odd machine that is 100% responsible for you being this tiny now, along with an illuminating cassette tape.
An ant! My God, today the world has changed forever!
From here on out, you're on your own. You can tackle any problem at any time, but slowly and surely you'll start amassing more recipes and, more importantly, practical knowledge. At first, you're going to notice a problem. You're dying of thirst and these puddles aren't helping you. But you can start to craft more things now that you're getting more materials, including an axe that lets you drop down blades of grass to use as building material. But as you do, you may notice something. A drop of dew hanging from the blade of grass. As it drops to the ground, the thought will likely occur that, oh, that's fresh water, isn't it? Boom, you have your source of hydration. Naturally, the second problem would be food. Now you're not dying of thirst, but you are dying of hunger, and that's not much of an improvement. You can make a roasting spit, as I did, but without anything to roast, it's just decoration. You can kill things like ants or those horrible jump-scaring gremlins mites, but they don't provide you any food items. So you're going to look around for something to eat and, oh no, back up, wait, no, stop, no more, get away. So, you can't go that way. At least back near the base camp, we have things we can handle. Mites are small and jumpy, but they take very little to kill. Worker ants can be intimidating, but they are relatively easy to stun, and weevils don't even attack you. Sadly, the ants do kill and eat the weevils. You have no idea the kind of joy I felt after realizing that yes, the weevils will be your initial food source. Because previously, I ran around for a solid 5 minutes looking for something, anything I could eat, and I even made the mistake of heading past these mites here in search of food. I'm not even going to tell you what's over there. So good luck with that. But that's not the end of it, because food spoils. Unless you find a way to preserve it, you'll be on the hunt regularly. But by then, you'll no doubt encounter your very first mutation. Mutations are an evolution on a similar system Obsidian tried in Outer Worlds, where the experiences of your specific game can trigger unique skills or passive effects for you to use. For instance, since I forgot to turn my sprint off half the time, my first mutation was Cardiofan, which gave me hyper stamina with an increase to exhaustion recovery. Not only can you pick and choose which mutations you want active, but you can pick multiple and design entire builds around them. There are so many little nooks and crannies, both literally and mechanically in the game, and some are genuine treats to discover for yourself. For instance, did you know that if you host a cookout for your ant neighbors, they might drop by and give you a gift? After feuding with these little monsters for the first few hours, even so much that I got a mutation just for killing them, the fact that we could actually get along was amazing and made me rethink how you could play the game. Not mites though, because they're arachnids, and arachnids hate everything. But me and the ants, we were bros, neighbors, partners. Except for the soldier ants, which is representative of how the working class must rise up against the shackles of the militarized proletariat. Wait, what? You mean if I make a suit out of their flesh, they won't attack me? Out of the way, Marvel, a new Ant-Man is in town. For some personal context, I began my history with Halo with Reach, then Halo 3, and then Halo 4. No 1 or 2, which is a jank way to play the games, I know, but I understood and felt the core story regardless. Reach was great, Halo 3 was hype even without playing the first two, and I could understand what Halo 4 was going for and appreciated it. Then there's the story of Guardians. Halo 5 Guardians is a game that reeks of incompetence on all but a technical level. Written in such a way that ensures you either don't know or don't care what's going on at any given moment. Meandering about with characters that the game decides not to actually inform you about for most of the story. The gameplay is fun when it lets you just run and gun, although the primarily Promethean enemies are boring compared to the uniquely designed and mechanically complex Covenant from games past. However, despite this, when you do fight Covenant, it hardly feels like there's any weight to it. You spent 3 games kicking the Covenant from one end of the galaxy to the other until it was completely wiped out. Oh, but now, for sure, this is definitely the last of the Covenant. Why are we still fighting them? Though trying to continue a story from Halo 4, it does so in a way that requires you to have a great deal of prior info on the series before starting to even begin understanding the first mission alone. Building on elements from Halo 4 Spartan Ops while clumsily expositing answers to vital questions. Why is Halsey being held by Covenant forces? Why is the Covenant still around? Why are the Prometheans betraying the Covenant? These questions keep building, and while some have answers, most of those answers lie elsewhere rather than the game itself. These issues are just the ones that pop up in the first mission, but they continue throughout the rest of the game. Okay, that was a lot of negativity. How about a few positives? As I mentioned before, the gameplay is enjoyable, with the new mechanics like the Spartan Charge being a welcome addition. Newer weapons and vehicles are also enjoyable to mess around with, and besides all I can say against the story and some predatory business habits, the graphics and music are top-notch. But enough joy. Back to pain. Both core components of the game's story, the mystery of Cortana and the conflict between Osiris and Blue Team, are incredibly ham-fisted. Besides Cortana speaking like an r/intellectual with all the clarity of a magic 8-ball, Team Osiris has what can easily be referred to as inverse character development, where the more you learn about them, the less you care. Admittedly, having Nathan Fillion anywhere near a game gives you points, but 2 plus -6 still gets you a negative number. Not only are the members of Osiris caricatures and not characters, when the majority of your time is spent taken up by them when you could be following the far more interesting plot of Blue Team and Master Chief, you grow to be more and more frustrated with them. What's worse is that Halo Reach clearly shows how to introduce and endear the player to a new team of characters, and Noble Team had even more members than Osiris did. Furthermore, when most of the missions spend time at places doing things that have nothing to do with the main Cortana plot, it feels like you're being given busy work in a Halo campaign. For an even further in-depth breakdown of all the problems with Halo 5, look to the Act Man, who has multiple videos on it. I'd recommend the newest video as it really gives you the kind of experience you'd get playing it for the first time, namely confusion. In conclusion, I still don't know what a Guardian is.
5 years. 5 long years. That's how long it took us to get Harvest back.
By the end of Halo 5, I had pretty firmly decided that I was okay saying goodbye to Halo. However, Halo was not yet ready to say goodbye to me. Halo Wars was an interesting game to say the least, with it basically being Age of Empires in the Halo universe. While nothing world-shatteringly spectacular, it was a solid game that showed the world of Halo could be more than just an FPS. So how does its sequel hold up? Well, here's a good sign. The first part of the opening cutscene hit me with so much nostalgia for Halo that I paused the game, replayed Halo Wars 1, and then played the second. This is not a joke. This is a cry for help. So as a special 2-in-1, let's talk both Halo Wars games. Starting 21 years before the events of Halo 1, the story follows the UNSC crew and forces of the Spirit of Fire, as they're in the midst of war against the Covenant. The primary characters of the story are the Spirit of Fire's Captain, Cutter, the classic American action hero Sergeant Forge, Professor Anders, the crew's onboard scientist and researcher, Serena, the Spirit of Fire's sassy AI, the Arbiter, and the Prophet of Regret for the Covenant, as well as the Spartan 2 squad, Red Team, who, while present, don't really have a lot of story impact, but I felt the need to mention them for later. Shortly after the reclamation of the colony of Harvest, the Spirit of Fire and its crew track the Covenant to a Forerunner base on the planet being uncovered by the Arbiter. But not the one you may know. This is the previous Arbiter. You can probably guess what eventually happens to him. After this, a chase is kicked off as the Spirit of Fire tracks the Arbiter and his Covenant forces across the galaxy in search of a Forerunner shield world, and the power held within, almost unleashing the Flood in the process. During the campaign, you come to know and respect the characters despite definitely being less complex than the characters in Halo 5. However, it's in their simplicity that the story is able to get you attached without stopping the pacing even for a moment, which is helped by the inherently slower gameplay that the genre calls for. Don't get me wrong, you can definitely move quickly in this game. Once you've sufficiently prepared, battles can go by in a blur, charging across a map like a wave. However, in many of these maps, the enemy is doing just the same, meaning timing is key. Among other things it does better than Halo 5, it also establishes a rivalry between Forge and the Arbiter in a single cutscene, far better than Guardians did in several hours of gameplay for Chief and Locke. It built anticipation for what the Prophet and the Covenant was planning, far better than for whatever Cortana had going on. And it made both the Spartans and the normal humans seem awesome in the face of such overwhelming obstacles, whereas Guardians made Spartans feel less superhuman and every non-Spartan character seem irrelevant. Ultimately, by the end, it encourages a feeling of camaraderie between you and the crew, which lends itself to a somber ending where the crew is forced into cryosleep, saving humanity from a Covenant fleet, but left adrift in empty space. It is here that the story of Halo Wars 2 begins. 28 years later, long after their adventure on the Shield world, the Spirit of Fire finds itself drawn out of deep space by the Ark, the place in which the titular Halos were first constructed. With their onboard AI Serena's lifespan having ended while they were in cryosleep, Captain Cutter sends Red Team down to investigate an emergency signal. Immediately, you'll notice besides new voice actors, expanded personalities to each character. Cutter's, Anders, Red Team, each one has grown from their one-dimensional roots into something a little more two-dimensional. They may not be the deepest characters still, but if you played the first game and you grew attached to them, then it'll prove to be a meaningful step up from the original. Jerome inherits the on-the-ground commander role that Forge took up before his sacrifice at the end of Halo Wars 1, with his own special cockiness and Spartan awesomeness. Alice becomes a lone wolf guerrilla warfare specialist that has some of the most enjoyable missions in the game, and Douglas gets slapped and removed from combat for the first act of the game, but I still like him. Side tangent. If and when 343 finally lets Master Chief sleep, I vote that they replace him with Jerome. It makes total sense. He's still in his prime, having been in cryo sleep for the last 28 years, and he even has his own AI partner. It'd be perfect. As for the game itself, the gameplay is a grand step up from the original. While the campaign does hold a lot back from you when it comes to units or mechanics, it feeds these mechanics to you at a reasonable rate, so by the time you reach the final mission, you truly feel as though you've mastered every part of the game. And though the campaign ends on a somewhat open note, clearly indicating that they plan to add more with DLC, as they clearly have since, it still felt largely satisfying as an ending. The banished forces were pushed back, help is probably on the way, and both sides are pushed into an equal playing field. Are you a fan of RTS? Are you a fan of Halo? Both will find something here, and if you like both, like me, then both games are well worth your time.
It's breathing. It's breathing. He knows she's getting closer. He can feel her coming.
Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice is an odd game to say the least. Following our protagonist Senua as she journeys to the Norse Helheim in search of a way to bring back a loved one. Throughout the story, Senua is chased by a darkness that threatens to overtake her and attacks her with visions constantly. Needless to say, it's an allegory for grief, depression, anxiety, and psychosis. It's an oppressive game with a chorus of voices constantly assaulting you as you do puzzles or fight enemies at sporadic intervals. While early puzzles can be a bit unintuitive and lacking in explanation, once you figure out the basics, they'll serve you for the rest of the game. Senua's Sacrifice isn't a terribly long game, but it introduces a level of dread and tension that perfectly matches its themes with its permadeath system. If you fail, the darkness on Senua's body grows. Die enough time and Senua becomes consumed and all progress is lost. It's a harsh penalty, although the generally short length can be seen as a counterbalance to this. Even so, there were multiple moments, particularly in the mid-game, that left me shaking even after I got through, due to the stress of possible permadeath looming overhead. If you want a relaxing game experience, then do not play this game. Whether from the game mechanics, atmosphere, or themes, it's not a game meant for light consumption. But push through and many more challenges will become far easier as you learn how to handle them, and even the voices that once berated you begin cheering for you. While I have some issues with parts of the message the game tries to tell, the greater whole about finding value in now and not lingering on what is lost is a good one that no doubt resonates with many. What else is there to say? 2 out of the 3 boss fights are fun and mechanically satisfying, and the other one is Fenrir. Oh, right. One caveat to mention, and if you don't want the immersion of this game to be ruined forever, skip ahead a few seconds into the next one. Apparently, permadeath isn't actually a mechanic. It's a massive bluff the game tells you to freak you out and push that feeling of fear over you, and congratulations, it worked on me. Great, now I can't even trust my games anymore. Weirdly enough, I can't decide whether I think it's a good or bad thing that they bluffed us this way, but I'm still going to hold it against them. It was around this time that my Game Pass Core subscription ran out, and so I took a break for a few months due to monetary restrictions. By the time I returned to Game Pass, a few new games had been added, such as Deep Rock Galactic, a great multiplayer game that I've only ever heard good things about. However, due to possessing a crap headset and wanting to keep the list of games I already had set up, I chose not to look into it, or any games alphabetically set before Hellblade. Still, my life started to get more active and I had less time to sit down and play more of these games. This problem was compounded once my channel started taking off and I started focusing more time actively on that, making weekly uploads as best I could. This is ultimately what slowed down and killed any chance of finishing all the Game Pass core games before the year deadline I set for myself. Still, with that in mind, I did manage to get a few more games finished before that deadline hit, and the first one of them is one I had some experience with. Human Fall Flat is a physics puzzle game with teamwork elements that is remarkably soothing when you get a partner that doesn't just throw themselves off the map to watch their body smack into the pavement over and over again. Admittedly, it is pretty funny. Every puzzle can be brute forced if you really try, but there's always a sense of satisfaction in figuring out the proper route to progress. And the extra levels provide an opportunity for real challenge and problem solving should you want that. It can be somewhat repetitive, but the unique settings of the levels add flavor, and every so often you get a very unique puzzle that flexes those squishy parts of your brain that go normally unused as you spend all day perusing YouTube videos. But plainly, there isn't that much to the game. It's a relaxing puzzle game that lets you lean back and have some fun, but is still engaging for couch co-op. Or is it? Have you ever noticed how every level is some kind of abandoned area? A hollow remnant of civilization in one way, shape, or form? And how the game calls the levels dreams? And in the tutorial section, a strange heavenly voice philosophizes at you, and even if you beat all the dreams, you just wind up falling back again into the first dream. You see, it's all a conspiracy. It pretends to be a silly puzzle physics game, but Human Fall Flat actually takes place in purgatory, and you're trapped forever in a labyrinth of your own mind and memories. There is no escape, only the endless fall into the abyss. Anyway, onto a more lighthearted game. You start in a dark, somewhat foggy forest at night. You are alone, and you are a child. Small, weak, and the only thing you can do is walk forward. You soon see signs of people, but they don't seem comforting, and it's clear they're looking for something. Or someone. They shine flashlights when they hear you, send dogs when they see you, and if they catch you... This is a starting introduction to the game Inside. From there, you find yourself in a dystopic world, children being mind-controlled, repulsive experiments, and a dull coloring to almost everything. When I said you were small and weak, I meant it. This game will make you feel it. Through every step of the way, you will have to work around rather than through problems because you are tiny in the face of the horror of this world. You see children stuffed into boxes, pens, cages, waiting until they are needed to be controlled. Dogs and electric devices are used to cull anything that is out of order. At one point in a city, when you fall through a broken floor, you are forced to follow in a line of children moving robotically as adults, children, and even parents all watch. Do they approve? Do they hate it? You can't tell. All you can do is try to survive. But as you do, questions mount as to what exactly is going on in this place. What looks to be sunken cities, trains of people sent away, and further in you find more broken and worn down industrial areas. Like something was lost. And then, there's that ending. Huge spoiler warning, skip ahead to avoid them. After probably around 3 hours or so of walking right and running from everything you encountered, something shifted. I began to notice something odd about our little red shirt friend. You would think with how this game started they'd be running towards safety of some kind, but that didn't appear to be the case. Instead, following the path our protagonist was set on took us to more bizarre and dangerous locales. Wherever our friend was going, it wasn't safety. Instead, we find ourselves deep in the very kind of facility you'd expect the kid to have escaped from. And then I remembered the name of the game. Inside. Perhaps that game told us where we were going the whole time. Inside the facility, inside the labs, and much more. At a certain point, the adults that previously had represented danger to us just seemed to ignore us, captivated by something just beyond our sight, but not beyond the sight of the boy. Onwards we go through back rooms and secret passages as we get closer to whatever it is everyone seems so focused on until we see it. It's horrendous, it's disturbing, and it's trapped. We begin to free it, and then The ending of Inside is a trip. No more are you some weak, frail child, but now you're the monster of your own story. A blob of flesh and limbs barreling through everything in a frantic attempt to break free. Some try to stop you, others run in horror, and more watch in seemingly stunned silence. Some even try to help you, coaxing you elsewhere, either trying to help you or maybe trap you again. Regardless, even when you are trapped, you break out once more and are free. Inside is a confounding game, and I feel as though that it is by design. The ending is wildly poetic, for lack of a better term, and clearly asks the viewer to theorize about it. And while that isn't really what I'm aiming for with this video, I will say this: if they were looking to get my attention, they got it. And that, well, that's the end of that. It's as far as I got in my year with Game Pass Core. It was both a success and a failure. I did not hit my original goal, but before I ever had to, my channel began to grow, which is part of why I was unable to. Frankly, there's not much about that which I would change, and it leaves the door open to cover the rest of the games in a similar style sometimes later. Regardless, I'm glad I thought of the idea, as it introduced me to game genres I might never have tried otherwise, and it broadened my horizons. It challenged me both as a gamer, as a consumer, and as a fan of storytelling. There was good, bad, and stuff just not made for me. But in the end, I enjoyed my year with Game Pass Core. Remember to like, comment, subscribe, all those other obligatory things, because all of it really does so much for me and my videos. Thank you to my ever-loyal patrons, allowing me to legitimately say that I'm making money off my random rambling ideas. You are all true legends. Memberships, as always, exist, but feel free to give as you wish, if you wish. So, as always, I am the Hearth Guy, and I will see you all next time around the hearth.